All right, everybody, it's time to roll the win. Practice like you play like you practice. Let's go roll.
People like to talk about the history of dice control, and they think it's like maybe a recent phenomenon and everything, but really, as long as people have been picking up dice, they've been trying to figure out ways to manipulate them and play to their advantage. And if you go back to old archaeological sites in the Roman Empire, they find old Roman dice carved out of ivory that were obviously deliberately gimmicked or loaded or whatever to try and give the shooters an advantage. And you can come forward into the U.S. military. They had trench dice, military dice that were made out of bullets and anything else these guys could find when they were in the trenches. And these guys would carve these dice of lead from bullets, and a lot of them were obviously shaved in certain ways to give them an advantage if you knew what the bevel was on the dice and how to bet the darn things. So it's always been around. But as far as controlling the dice with the way you toss the dice, that's a different kind of animal. The first time anything that we know of was written about it was in 1927, and it was in a little pamphlet published by the KC Card Company. And if you bought these playing cards from them, you'd get a little pamphlet free with them, if you bought a certain bulk amount of cards from them. And the KC Card Company was in Chicago, and this pamphlet was called How to Control Fair Dice. And the pamphlet was a little thing. It's, I don't know, about 30 pages long. I actually have a copy of it, photocopy of it around here somewhere in the famous Heavy Archives. And there's not a lot in there that's practical today, but the one toss that's probably most applicable to what we do today is an underhanded roll, or what we call the blanket roll, or the underhanded toss that a lot of the guys use these days when you're standing a stick right or left and you try to bowl the dice gently down the table on a really bouncy table or something like that. And that one was in there. There's also a shot that some people call, and let me preface this by saying there are a lot of shots that are referred to as the Indian shots. And the Indian shot picked up its name from a player who used to play at the Horseshoe in Las Vegas back during the 50s and 60s. And he was a Navajo guy, and he would pick up the dice. Now, this may look familiar to you because you've seen this guy at the Beau Rivage in Biloxi.
Okay.
But he would pick up the dice like this.
Yeah.
And then he would throw them horizontally like this, like he was throwing a frisbee when he would release them. I'll hold my hand up. He would throw them like this, and then just open his fingers and let the dice spin like this, as opposed to tumble down the table.
Yeah.
And it's basically a dice slide. You're sliding the dice down the table instead of tumbling the dice down the table. And the objective is the numbers that you set on top stay on top all the way down the table. And if only one of those numbers stay on top, then you kind of know how to bet. Like if you set the sixes on top, you know you're either going to roll a 6-1, 6-2, 6-3, 6-4, 6-5, 6-6. So you hope you don't get the 6-1, right? And you set that 1 the farthest away on the bottom, and you know only to bet the uptown numbers, the 8, 9, 10. And maybe you throw out an 11, 12 on the horn, and you hope you get one of those in a wild card shot. But that was the Indian shot. The guy used it down at the Horseshoe all the time and was infamous for it. And I think that shot was in that book as well. And we've seen that shot at the tables before, which is the reason I brought it up. It's kind of an easily recognizable shot, and it's not considered by the casinos to be a legal shot. But a lot of these young people that are on the box or whatever running the games don't really recognize it because they haven't been educated to these shots. We do not teach these shots, boys and girls. So In case you're thinking Heavy is advocating going to the casino and doing this, that's a no. Okay? I don't want to see you get in trouble with one of these tosses, but they are out there. You need to be aware of them because, heck, if you see somebody tossing one and he's having a monster hand, there's nothing to say you can't make a buck off of it, right?
Right.
Why not? So, the next major book written on dice control after that, 1927, huge lap before dice control is mentioned in any literature that I know of, other than a brief, well, it wasn't a mention of dice control. In one of Scobletti's early books, Beat the Bastard, no, what is it? Beat the Crap Out of the Casinos,
Yeah.
he talks about the captain. I like to set the dice on the V3s. I don't know why. It's just a superstition. I just like to throw it that way. Now, that was in his original book. As I understand it, when he rewrote that book for re-release, he kind of sweetened that up a little bit, and suddenly the captain was one of the world's first dice influencers. I don't know. You'd have to get a first edition of that book and the re-release version of that book and hold them side by side and see what changes were made to the book when he rewrote it. But I was told by someone that was close to me and that I trust that those changes were made. It's hearsay from my part. It would be interesting to take a look at it and see. But anyway, the next time anything I know in print was written about dice control specifically was by Zeke Feinberg in 2012. Zeke Feinberg, Atlantic City player, old school gambler. Everything he wrote about craps was kind of like the Dice Doctor. He was of that generation. He wrote about single odds games, and he was mostly a dark side player. But when he shot the dice, he liked to set the dice. And Zeke was a dice setter. And he wrote a book called Preset the Dice and Beat the Bastard Casinos. Great title, right?
Yeah,
Pretty much
great
as
time.
sure as you're not going to get on mainstream bookshelves in 2012. But, you know, it's sitting down there at Gambler's Book Club, and it's one of their top 10 sellers in the category, you know. And
So it's still out
right
there.
now, I think, huh?
It's still out
I'm
there.
sorry? It's still out there on the internet. You can buy it, and it's available for download on Kindle. Although I've read that the illustrations on it don't download properly on Kindle, which is something you have to be aware of when you're downloading books online. If they have illustrations in them, they don't always look the same they did in the original book. The book is 169 pages long. If Zeke had written in proper grammatical style, it would be about 42 pages long. Zeke liked to
Okay.
put big print. He liked maybe to have his point, one paragraph point, on one page and then go on to the next page. And in some pages, there'd be one sentence with a lot of exclamation points and crazy stuff like that. So he was not a writer as such. He was just an old guy that liked to put words on paper and sell books and sell his betting strategies and make a little money on the side while he was playing craps in Atlantic City. And he was apparently quite good. What I didn't like about Zeke's books when I read them was the way he described different dice sets. Zeke described the dice sets with alpha characters. So the V2, the V3, the cross sixes, the things that we can visualize were the AA set, the BB set, the
Oh, that'd be
AB
tough.
set, the
That would be
BA
tough.
set. Yeah, I mean, they were all alpha characters, okay? Very confusing.
Yeah.
Next down the pike came Yuri Koeneko's book in the early 2000s. And that was kind of the breakout book for a lot of people because Yuri did the first scientific approach to writing a book about dice control. And he really did the math behind it, explained all of it, showed us the groups. He showed us his favorite shooting position, which was coincidentally straight out. And he again showed us the various dice sets. But like his predecessor, Zeke, he went for a different kind of definition of how the sets were described, and he used Roman numerals. So he
Oh
had
my
the
God.
II set, and the IV set, and the VI set, and the VII set, and the III, and it was insane trying to figure all that stuff out. Now, that gets me to where I really got started in the dice control business, back around 2001, somewhere along in there. But now I'm going to take a big back step. Prior to really getting into dice influence, I was basically, my wife and I had been married for a long time. And we did not have children. We had substantial discretionary income. We both enjoyed going to the casinos. And I was essentially a junket player. We went to Vegas and we went to Tahoe, maybe 3, sometimes 4 times a year. We looked at them as vacation trips. They weren't necessarily gambling trips, but we did gamble enough to pay for our trips and had a great time and enjoyed it. And if we lost some money on the trips, it was okay, because the trips were free and we got all that entertainment while we were there, and all our food and all our beverages and everything. So, great time. Sometimes we lost money, sometimes we won money. So, give and take.
Yeah.
Then in 1994, they opened the first riverboats right down the road from us in Shreveport, Bossier City. And I went from being a 3 to 4 times a year player to being a 3 to 4 times a month player. And suddenly it was even more than that. I mean, I was over there sometimes 3 and 4 times a week. So
Wow.
I stepped up my exposure a lot, and it became pretty important to me to learn to be a smarter player, which is where I got introduced to John Patrick. John had his own craps forum on the internet, and it was John Patrick, so you want to be a gambler. And he had a craps forum, much like the old Axis Power craps forum is today, where people hung out and discussed a number of games, but his craps subforum was the most popular one. And I hung out there all the time, and oddly enough, in very short order, I became one of the go-to guys that answered questions for the new guys that came in the forum. Because, as you guys know, I like to post and I enjoy hanging out on the internet groups. So I hung out on John's group. I hung out on a group on the casino.com website that was run by Larry Adele, who used to publish the Sharpshooter newsletter and
Right.
owned a big gambling bookstore in San Diego. And Larry did a lot of active work promoting seminars and the like in Las Vegas and around the country. Really nice guy. He bought several articles for me when I started writing gaming articles and published them in the Sharpshooter. We were good friends. Then he retired, moved down to Mexico to live a good life. And also started participating a lot on recreational craps gambling news group. And in that day, there weren't a lot of forums around, but the old rec gambling news groups were the mainstay. And this predated a lot of the forums, and this is where people went to talk seriously about games. And then I started hearing talk about dice control, and I started looking into it, And I noticed as I played more and more, and this was in the mid-90s over at the casinos in Shreveport, Bossier, that some of these guys were better shooters than others. I mean, I became a regular over there, and I knew these 2 Hispanic brothers that came in, and this one African-American gentleman, and a couple of Caucasian older gentlemen, like World War II vet types. They
Yeah.
came in, and every time they touched the dice, they had 15, 20, 25, 30 number hands. I mean, they were just consistent as hell. And it seemed like every one of these guys was standing in the hook. They were getting the dice and they were stacking them. And they were spinning them with them stacked down table to the opposite hook and landing them right in the mixing bowl, the crotch, whatever you call it, just kind of binding them up in there and killing them in there. And they were getting a lot of repeating numbers. So I started watching what numbers they were setting them on, and they were all setting them with the 6s crossed, facing up. And I thought, well, I can do that. So I started emulating tosses, and I started getting repeating numbers. And I'm like, there's something to this. And so I started tossing that, and pretty soon I'm as good as these guys are. And I'm not only doing it from the hook, I'm standing stick left and stick right, tossed them into the opposite turn, and I'm just killing it. And
Right.
not long later, I'm out tossing from straight out, doing the same thing, right straight out and still tossing into the turn, but from straight out and just shooting the lights out. And it's not long before I walk into the casino and I hear, here comes the field man, because my dominant number was the 9. And I just go in there and pound nines, and all the field bettors are just going crazy when I walk in the door, run to the table. So it wasn't long before I got a reputation for being like a really good shooter. So now I go on a cruise, as I want to do. And I'm out middle of the ocean, and I'm throwing the dice, and I throw 3 craps. And nice little dealerette says 3 craps, and get the dice back, and I throw 3 craps. And I get the dice back, and I throw 3 craps. And after about the fourth one in a row, the little dealerette says, if you're not betting the 3 craps, you're not winning any money. And I'm like, hey, now there's a concept, that never even occurred to me, because I'd always been taught, yeah, pass line, come bet, 3 come bets with odds, and I
Right.
was just getting into place betting, place the 6 and 8 and play pass to come, replacing the 6 and 8 place bets with come bets, and then finally getting into placing dominant numbers if they hit a couple of times, if you can get a come bet on them. I mean, it took me a long time to make that transition. And, now, holy mackerel, put a bet on the ace deuce in the middle of a hand? Who ever heard of such a thing? Well, suddenly now my eyes are open.
Right.
And I get home from that cruise, and I get a pair of dice out and sit down at the table, and I start going through all the different combinations on all 6 of the major dice sets. I sat down and figured out what the 6 major dice sets were from at uh, looking at the dice and turning them around, and figured out there were 6 major families, and what was going on with them. And by this time, I had read Zeke's book. I think I'd read Zeke's book. I think we were up in the early 2000s at this point. For sure, I'd read Dice Control for Casino Craps, Yuri's book, because the whole thing with the VI and the IV and all that on the numbers for describing the dice set just had me confused as hell. So I sat down and went through and sorted out all the major dice families, and I built my first dice control strategy card. I may have one of those. Should have one of those within reaching distance of me here. I can't believe I don't. I'm sitting here at my table right now. I've got about 50 of them over there on the other side of the table. Anyway, so I built my first dice control strategy card, which was very crude. But I had a picture of the dice with spots drawn on it, and I had this is the V2, this is the V3, this is the cross sixes, this is the all sevens, this is the straight sixes, this is the parallel sixes. And little did I know that somebody else was calling all sevens a hard way set and just double pitched it, because I was pretty much unaware of what par was doing at the time, but that was about it. Anyway,
Right.
that's kind of how I got started with the dice control business. I built that little card, and I would carry it to me at the table, because I had written what the dominant numbers were on each one of those sets. And I would
Right.
change set in the middle of a hand, depending on what the point was. And and I got better. So time marches on. Anyway,
Well, the whole
uh,
concept for you at that time was to maximize your pass line odds or whatever, and hit your point. You were generally
and here's
trying to
the
shoot for
point.
your point.
I never thought
Yep.
about, yeah, I wanted to toss long hands, but I wanted to make my money off the pass line. In fact, it was on the come out row. I wanted to throw as many naturals as I could.
Right.
Let's throw 7s and 11s. Let's just throw as many naturals as we can on the come out, because that's a free throw. Got
Yeah.
nothing to lose. So let's just throw those 7s. If you got a $10 game, you $10 stack 5 up, rack 5. You win 15, stack 5 up, rack 10.
Yeah.
Every time
Yeah.
you press it up a unit, it's just the basic Paroli press. And, you get it up to $25, you win that one, take it back down to 10, and you've locked up $50 or so before you even get a point established. So
Right.
it's a fun way to play. Anyway, backtracking again. So in the 2000s, became aware of par through some of these forums out there, and
Right.
uh, by that time, Irish Setter had started his website. That's Tom Morgan. Tom founded a website called DiceSetter.com. DiceSetter.com was the first website on the internet truly dedicated 100% to dice control for casino crowds. Tom's site saw people like Mad Professor come out of nowhere and become like big stars in the business. Uh, that was a platform for some of my early articles to get published. There were a couple other guys, Mickey D, a friend of ours from up in Connecticut, who since passed away. Man, Mickey was a great coach. He helped me out at a seminar I did down in Biloxi early on, and he wrote some great trip reports. He was a retired, I believe he was a retired police officer, but he was a cabinet maker up there. Did beautiful work, handmade cabinets and restored antiques. When he came to me, he had his hands had so much lacquer and varnish caked up on them from all the work he did. He said, I just can't feel the dice. And I'm like, dude, you need to make a safe cracker. The first thing a safe cracker does before he tries to crack a safe is get sandpaper and sandpaper his fingertips down till they're damn near raw so he can feel the tumblers in the safe clicking
Yeah.
in as he's spinning the dial. I said, no wonder you can't feel it. I said, go get a file or some sandpaper or emery board or something and file those finger pads down. And he did, and he came to class the next day, and it was like magic. He could feel the dice, and that guy was shooting the lights out. So, anyway, he came to the seminar we did in Biloxi, and then he and his wife extended and did a couple of weeks vacation in New Orleans, and then went back home to Connecticut. And about 3 months later, his son called me and told me he passed away. Just
Mm.
dropped dead from a heart attack out in his workshop. So crazy. You never know when somebody's going to go like that. But
So
man,
that
he
was
had
that,
great
that was
particulars of
Mickey
life.
D.
Yeah, Mickey D was what we called him.
You don't have to tell his name. That's all right.
Yo 11 Man was his official handle. Mickey was his name. I don't recall his last name off the top of my head now. It's been 20 years,
Yeah.
But he was a good guy. I'll have to come up with another with some more of those names that were writing back then. Uh, some of these guys have gone on to do their own thing, and
Right.
work with other groups, and some have just been completely off the scene. You don't know what happened to them, if they're still alive, or if they just gave up on the game, or whatever. In fact, I talked to a guy this week who used to be a great player, and what are you doing these days, buddy? And he says, oh, playing Baccarat. It's like, okay. Yeah, it's a great game. If that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
So there's something for everybody. But anyway, Irish started that site to promote dice control. I was doing a lot of dark side stuff back in those days, in addition to the dice control. And there was a website called All Crap that had a forum associated with it. It was primarily adult players forum, and I was pretty active in it. And ultimately, it got taken down because it kept getting hijacked So when it got taken down, I cranked up the heaviest access power, perhaps for them as a dice control forum, but also more variety than just dicefitter.com. I put, the subboards in there for the dark side, betting strategies, and trip reports, and all that kind of stuff. So, wasn't really established to compete with Tom and his site, but we did have the dice control material in there. We did get a lot of cross posting and all that stuff, as you'd expect. And, Tom and I, we remained good friends and all that. We hooked up and played together, so we're all tight on that. In 2001, we got invited to attend a deal with Jerry Patterson for PAR in Las Vegas, and he was trying to recruit new students, and he invited Tom and I to advertise his program and try to solicit guys to come attend a one-day free seminar on a Friday in Las Vegas. And he would have Sharpshooter come in and give a mini class, and then give them the option, if they wanted to sign up for the full class on Saturday and Sunday. No obligation, none of that stuff, no high pressure sales, just here's what it is, here's what we do. If you're interested, blah, 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 And for each person that came to the class, Jerry was going to kick Irish and I a little stipend payment, and trust me when I say little, but it was a few bucks, enough to cover airfare to get us out there and back. So we thought, what the hell not, So we signed up with Jerry to do that. We're sitting through the seminar. In fact, Jerry comped Irish and me to the full seminar the entire weekend. So we sat through that entire weekend, and I did the opening remarks for the class on Friday because Jerry wanted me to, because of my internet presence or whatever. And I got up and did my comedy routine to open it up, and he thought I was highly funny, and so next time he did a big seminar in Vegas, he invited me out to do the song and dance routine again and be a major part of the seminar, which we'll talk about in a minute. But Tom and I are there listening to this presentation, and I turned to Tom and said, we could do this dog and pony show for half of what he's charging guys and do a better job of it. No. And he said, I was thinking the same thing. And that was the moment where the Access Power program was born. I mean, we just we're really unimpressed with the quality of the presentation and the materials, the handout materials, which were basically third generation mimeograph copies like you'd get your high school history test on in 1953. And the presentation was done on an overhead projector with clear plastic slides that Sharpshooter was writing on with a grease pencil. And this was the age, we were already in the age of PowerPoint presentations and slick stuff, I mean, this was the kind of stuff I did every day on the job, I was a PowerPoint king on the day job, so I'm sitting there like, damn, this could be a good presentation if you guys knew what the heck you were doing. But it wasn't. It was boring. And so anyway, we determined at that point that we were going to do something. The other point was Jerry had mentioned something on this, going into this, that he was thinking about retiring. So I asked him if he wanted to hook up for lunch, because I'd like to chat with him about that. Because what the hell, if I'm thinking about doing a seminar business, it's a lot easier to buy a going concern than it is to start one up. And Jerry had something I was very interested in. It's called a book of business. He had a client base. I mean, guys that were coming out to repeat seminars over and over and over. They were very loyal to him. And I would have loved to have had that book business. So Jerry and I had lunch, and we discussed that. I had lunch with he and Sharpshooter, and didn't realize at that time that Sharpshooter owned half of par with Jerry, that they were partners in it. Jerry had other concerns going on within his organization. He had a blackjack program called Target Blackjack. He had a roulette program. He had, several different games that he promoted, that he sold systems on. But the craps program had become his bread and butter, and the deal with Sharpshooter was, it was a partnership deal. So we had lunch together, and I pitched him a suggestion that instead of retiring completely, that he just semi-retire and think in terms of letting me run his operation, and then we'd break the company up into 4 regional areas, and we'd have one guy take Southeast, one guy take Central United States, Deep South, one guy take Southwest, one guy take North, Chicago up in that area, one guy take Pacific Northwest, whatever. Now, we'll break it up like that, and I had specific people in mind for each market, that were already in their organization, who were already coaches for them, guys who I thought would have been good for those markets, including Dominator, one of them, and several other guys that were active coaches. So he kind of liked that idea, but he said, I'm going to have to think about it and get back to you. And he did. And it took him 6 months, but he finally got back to me and told me, no, he decided he was going to keep working for a while, And so I said, that's fine. If you ever decide you're going to get out of the business, let me know. I'd be interested in it still, but you need to know I'm still going to go and do some seminars, And he says, well, you won't be the first guy that's tried it, and I'm still in the business, and none of them are.
Right.
And I said, I understand completely. I said, I think I'm going to do a little test market in Tunica, Mississippi. And he said, oh, Steve, he said, you'll never, ever get any turnout in Tunica. He says, I've tried. I've never gotten more than 8 people to sign up for a class there. And I said, well, I'm going to give it a shot, Jerry. And, I don't know. We'll either make it or we won't, but it's not going to cost me much to try. I'll go up there and rent a hotel room and a ballroom and a hotel room and take my practice rigs up there. We'll see who shows up. I'll do a little advertising and go for it. So
well, that's back when Tunica was a really great place to be.
Yeah. The only problem is they didn't have a dealer school, so I had to do it on practice rigs, So that was a little bit of an issue. But in those days, Jerry was doing most of his seminars on practice rigs, so it was not a big deal. So I go up to Tunica, talk to a hotel up there, and man, I get a hell of a deal on a ballroom up there in what was the Holiday Inn Express at that time. And for one afternoon or for one full day, and they throw me in a hotel for free too, this is a deal. And so I got that worked out. I started advertising on my site, on Irish's site, and a few other places around, and I had by that time accumulated some mailing addresses. I sent out some flyers and stuff. Well, I didn't get 8 people to sign up. I got 23. And I ended up, I had a guy that was, he was a handicapped fellow that really wanted to come to the class. And I said, tell you what, if you'll help me out the class, hand out manuals and help me move tables around, do this and that, so I'll just copy into the class, So I let this guy come for free, for a little bit of manual labor and stuff. And actually his wife helped out more than he did, but that's all cool. And then I called Jerry and said, Jerry, I got more than 8 people. I got about 23 up here. I said, do you mind if I get Jerry Stick to help me out? Jerry Stick, Stickman.
Okay, I've heard that name, Stickman. Yep.
Yeah, Jerry was one of one of the park coaches back then, lived in Memphis. I said, "Can I get Jerry to help me out with this class? Is that all right with you?" And he said, "Yeah, he's willing to help out." He's the only thing I ask is that you just introduce him as a park coach who's helping you out for the day. And not a problem, you know. So we took care of that, and Jerry helped out, did a great job, and I told him, I said, I'll pay you to help me out, and I don't think he expected to pay him much, but I kicked him a few $100s, and the guy was just stunned, I think, that he got
Right.
paid, and helped me load my stuff in the car, and he was in his car, and he was gone after the class was over with. One of the ladies in that class, after the class, a gal named Brenda, went over to the Hollywood Casino and tossed an hour and a half hand, about 54, 55 numbers. Brenda was the gal who came in with a French manicure with nails about that long. And I said, "Brenda, beautiful nails, but if you're going to throw dice, you're going to have to lose them." She said, "I'll be right back." I went out to her car for about 5 minutes and came back with them cut down to the nubs.
Wow.
And turned out to be one of our best shooters that class. She tossed that hour and a half hand. Now, I had 3 rollers in that class. One of the guys we call the luckiest man alive brought his 2 best friends and paid for their classes because he wanted them to learn how to shoot so he could make some damn money off their hands instead of losing money on them all the time. So
Right.
they came down there, and LMA won $183,000 on her hand, and the other 2 guys,
How
between
much?
them, one of
Say
them
that
won
again. How
70 and
much?
change.
How much money?
183,000.
183,000.
183,000. That's the luckiest man alive.
Woo.
Now you may ask, how do you win $183,000 on a hand like that?
Well, you bet
Well, you
big, right?
start out, yeah, you start out buying the 4 and 10 for 5,000 each, and then you place a 6 and 8 for 6,000 each, and then you got 10 times odds, so you got a $500 pass line with 5,000 odds, 2 $500 come bets with 5,000 odds, and then you reduce to $250 come bets with $2,500 odds, and then you just keep pushing out those $250 come bets with 2,500 odds, and you let them replace all those place bets and buy bets when they fall until the hand's over with. At least that's
Right.
what he told me he did, and that's probably pretty accurate. But hey, take it to the bank.
Yeah.
And the other 2 guys between them won about 120,000. One of them won 73, something like that. The other one won about 37. Anyway, they took 300,000 off the table between the 3 of them, and the following week, word of that hit the internet and all the chat rooms, and over on the recreational gambling craps group, somebody posted it, and all the negative naysayers that dice control doesn't work group, the ones, all jumped up and said, "That's a lie, that didn't happen, all this BS." And this guy gets on there and posts, "No, I'm a craps dealer at Hollywood, and I was on the table when it happened." And not only did he win it, but the security came and put his chips in a rack and walked him to the cage with him.
Wow.
So, yeah, he won it. So uh, that put me in the dice influence or dice control seminar business in a pretty big way in 2001. Uh, Later that year, uh, we had another gathering in Vegas uh, shortly after 9/11, I guess it was, and it was another big meeting. This was a dice festival that Patterson put on, and this was the first time I met Howard, rock and roller, and Howard
Yeah.
was he was among the audience, and he was making the rounds. He was working, I think, with Patterson at that point as an assistant coach, but he was hanging out in the audience, making the rounds, and all the vendors, buying books from everybody, and trying to learn everything he could. That was the first time I met Howard, and we did a big convention with about 200 craps players there, and there was myself, Scabletti, Larry Adele, and Sharpshooter, and Tom Morgan, Irish setter, were the speakers on the event that day. Once again, they had me the opening act of the show, and I did 30 minutes. And if you've heard my Crap Shooters Buffet CD, that was my
I
30
have.
minutes I did on my opening act. It's been edited somewhat, but that's pretty much verbatim what I did on my act there, except for maybe the opening 90 seconds or so. So that was that. And after that little opening act, Scabletti approached me and asked me if I had a book, and I said yes. He wanted to know if he could be my agent and sell it to a Main Street bookseller. And I told him I'd think about it, and I thought about it and told him no, which I think was probably the advent of our adversarial relationship, uh, because I don't think he ever liked me after that, and so I think we had a pretty adversarial relationship ever since that. Whether that affected him or not, I don't know, but I know from the point that he got involved with Golden Touch, when Golden Touch founded and money came into the picture, there was a very adversarial relationship between him and Irish Setter over at DiceSetter.com and yours truly. And I won't go any deeper into that
Yeah.
other than to say that I put all that crap behind me. I don't have time for it. And yeah, I mention him occasionally as the famous gaming author and kind of joke around a little bit about it. But honestly, he's retired. I wish him well. He's recycling his same old articles through Casino Player magazine that he wrote, 20 years ago. He's just dusting them off and tweaking a word or two and recycling them to collect another paycheck in retirement. Good for him. If that's what you've got to do to make a buck, that's fine. When we got back to Vegas for that seminar, a funny thing happened. I saw all the par coaches clustered up off to the side, and I overheard them talking. And Jerry Stick was saying, "You should have seen Heavy's seminar. He had a PowerPoint presentation with all these great slides, full color, with graphics of dice and dice table and all the card with all the different numbers of the possibilities of the different numbers you can roll on the different dice sets and names for the different dice sets and he had handouts and a manual with color illustrations in it and he paid me for helping him out." And they're all, "He paid you?" Well, yeah. And, well, I'd like to get paid for helping out at the class. Me too. I've never been paid. And that's when I learned that through all his years, Jerry had never paid any of his coaches for helping out at the classes. These guys were paying their own airfare to fly to Vegas. They were bringing their practice rigs with them on the airplane to sit up at the Mardi Gras Hotel, Best Western, over home Paradise, in the ballroom where they did their meetings, and using their own practice rigs to teach the classes on. And I mean, it was nuts. And those guys weren't getting paid a dime for it. They did it because they liked each other. All the coaches liked each other. They enjoyed getting together and playing together when they were in Vegas. So they planned all their hookup meetings around Jerry's classes. So it's really, in a sense, it's kind of like a lot of my students come to my classes. Yeah, they want to get a tune-up and they want to get the toss brushed off, and they want to hear if I have any new betting strategies or that sort of thing. But these guys like each other, and they like hanging out together, and they go
Yeah.
to the table together, and they enjoy playing together. And they know this guy plays stick left, this guy plays stick right, this guy's a great throwdown shooter. And they break up in teams and they go beat the casino. And I mean, it's a fun recreational weekend for those guys where they get to toss tune up while they're at it and get to play with the coaches, which you don't get to do if you're in some of these other camps. And it just works great. Moving forward, a few months later, Parr is having a class in Atlantic City. And it's kind of Scobletti's coming out party as a coach. Um, he's been presented to the world as being a famous dice controller. In fact, people who had seen him toss before that say he was pretty random. He, yeah, he'd set the dice and he'd throw them, but he was a pretty random shooter. He wasn't really what we would call a DI these days. So several of the par coaches have been working with him on his toss to get his skill level up to a degree where they felt comfortable with having him on a tune-up station, teaching other players how to shoot and demonstrating his toss to them. And I guess that had been going on leading up to that class. At least that's what I've heard. Disclaimer, I was not there. I did not see any of this. I'm dealing with hearsay here.
Okay.
So, uh, because Scobletti was involved, they had an extraordinarily large class that weekend. Because, let's face it, Jerry had a hard time saying no to somebody who wanted to sign up for the class. He just bring in another practice rig and put somebody else in there to teach more students. So he wound up with an overly large class that weekend. Now, the way they structure this thing, they usually do these things in on weekends in a hotel conference room where they could set up a bunch of practice rigs. But in Atlantic City, they'd use the Casino Dealer School, which had a couple of craps tables in it. And if they had more students than they could handle, then they'd have to do practice rigs somewhere else in the dealer school and spread things around and make it work. A little bit difficult. In Vegas, they did a lot of the stuff on practice rigs on like a Friday. Then Saturday morning, you would go in and have like a 15-minute tune-up session with Sharpshooter himself at the Casino Dealer School. And then you'd go out and play a live session with your coach from your primary coach from your tune-up group. And then come back and report back to Sharpshooter, how did your live session go? You know, and get a little critique. And then Sunday you were free to go out and play as a group or whatever you wanted to do. It was a different kind of format.
Quick question.
Anyway,
Quick question
yeah.
then. So Sharpshooter, he's the one that really he's the one that kind of came up with the grip and the shot, correct?
Yeah, Sharpshooter and another guy from Canada named Eric. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. I'll have to think about that. He and another fellow were working on a craps tossing system independently of each other and unbeknownst to each other simultaneously. And they kind of got together. I almost had his name. They kind of got together, from what I heard, and worked on it somewhat together. Both of these guys were roulette guys. Sharpshooter was a roulette system player with Patterson.
Okay.
Sharpshooter was also on Casino.com. He was there. You know, you had a game expert for the different games on Casino.com. Sharpshooter was their roulette expert. His real name is Chris Palicki, Pawliki.
Yeah.
And Chris, is, under his real name, is their roulette expert on that website. Whereas Larry Adele was the craps expert on the website. I found that kind of funny. But, God, I wish I could remember that other guy's name.
That's all right.
Somebody will pop up with the comments on the.
When Sharpshooter came out with that grip and that toss, at that time it was always taught as a pendulum toss, was it not?
It was always a pendulum toss. It was always a three-finger front grip. You know, the three fingers on the front of the dice.
Right.
It was always shoot from stick left with a big backswing, pendulum toss, and 45-degree angle, and hardway set. I mean, those were like the big four, big five, whatever. So that's it, which made it so easy to identify a par shooter. I mean, you
Right.
could spot them a mile away.
Yeah.
Where were we there? We were in Atlantic City. And these guys were working an extremely long day because they had so many players. And now I'm going to give you the hearsay story.
Okay.
I cannot report this as fact because I was not there. But it sounds like fact. And the story is all the par coaches, and that included Dominator, were working hard that day at the dealer school on getting all the players tuned up and their horses looking right and all that stuff. None of them getting paid to do so. All of them sitting there knowing, if he pays his coaches, why don't I get paid? And around 12:30, 1 o'clock, everybody's getting hungry, so Jerry decides to go to the little Italian place next door to the dealer school, across the railroad tracks from it. I've eaten there myself. And do a sandwich run. He's going to go get everybody's sandwiches. And they've all eaten there before. They know what they want. He goes around and takes everybody's order. He writes it down on a piece of paper, goes over there, gets the sandwiches, and comes back. And he's going around the room delivering everybody's sandwiches. And he gets to Dom, and he gives him his sandwich, and he tells him, that'll be, I don't know the amount, let's just say $15.42. Pull a number out of the air. And Don became very upset and offended. Don is a nice Sicilian boy, so, you know, nice Sicilian boys have a reputation for having tempers. And I've seen Don get angry before. So, the word on the street is that Don became very upset and at having to pay for the sandwich, and expressed it so. But they finished out the day and got back to the hotel that night, and then either later that night or the next morning, Dom called a meeting of some of the coaches at Golden Touch. Not all of them, but some of them. And so the ones he invited came, most of them, and Frank Scabletti apparently came too. And he announced, apparently, from what I've heard, again, hearsay, he announced his plans to start his own group, Golden Touch, and he'd like to invite them to invest in it and become stockholders and join him in being coaches and all that. And that's how Golden Touch got started.
Okay.
And all those guys initially put some money in the kitty to help get the company started, and they all got a share of stock in the company, and some have stuck with it for the long run, some have cashed out. You know, Howard's left. Sharpshooter stuck with him for a short run, then he left and went back to Jerry. Scabletti, I think, has since cashed out. I'm sure some others have that names I don't know, but I know a lot of the guys that are still with him. You know, I mean, I shouldn't say it probably, but a couple of their coaches that they have with them are former students of mine. You know, and it is what it is. It's a small community, and
Yeah, it is.
and there's a lot of interbreeding in small communities like this. It happens. You know, you're from the South. You probably know an Uncle Daddy or two, so
Yeah.
they're out there.
Oh yeah.
But that's kind of how Golden Touch started. And so par was around first. We came along second. And no, we were not an outgrowth of par. Neither Tom nor I trained with par. We attended one of their seminars, but we already knew what we were doing. In fact, we discovered when we attended that seminar, comp, that we knew more than they did. And we're like, damn, they don't know about this. In fact, well, I talked about some things at the seminar that I was told, oh, no, that's a bad idea. Don't talk about that. You know, that wouldn't work. Things that I knew worked. Oh, no, don't tell them to do that. That wouldn't work. No. Hard way said only, blah, blah, blah. And then 6 months later, they were teaching an advanced dice setting class, and that was incorporated into it. The exact thing I was told not to tell anybody about. And I'm like, oh, I know to keep my mouth shut now. So anything you say can and will be used against you. So pat me down. I understand the program now. So that's okay. It's a small world, and I have no problem sharing ideas with people in the community. I you've been in classes with me where we've had Golden Touch students in the class, guys that are graduated from Golden Touch, and they want to see what we have to offer. No problem. I have guys from my classes go to GTC to see what they have. Happens all the time. There are players out there with a discretionary income that want to attend a class with everyone that teaches this stuff to absorb as much material they can, and then they want to settle on what's best for them and develop their own signature toss or whatever. So that's cool. Pick what works for you and discard the rest. I'm all about it. All right, so I guess we'd be probably doing well to mention some of the names that have impacted me in my dice career here. One of the guys I mentioned earlier that back in the 90s I met and got to know pretty well was John Patrick.